Osama bin Laden's assassination was a hoax. Hey, sorry, I didn't see you there, guys. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name's Marcus, and today we're diving into a series that I've started. This is the Australian Conspiracy Theory Iceberg, an iceberg tier list that I've created. If you're new to a tier list and you didn't catch the first video, I'll do a quick explanation of what they are. So, with an iceberg tier list, we start at tier 1, which is the tip of the iceberg, commonly known things, and then we progress further and further down to tier 2, 3, 4, eventually until we hit tier 8. Now, the further down the iceberg we go, the deeper down we go, the more strange things get, the more skewed things get. Now, if you are somebody that takes offense quite easily, probably not the series for you. If you haven't caught tier 1 of the Conspiracy Theory Iceberg, you can go check that one out, and then you can come back to this video, or you can watch this video and then go check that one out. Completely up to you. For the rest of you, relax, kick back, and let's enjoy as we go down into tier 2 of Australia's Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. Pub jargon. Theory 1 of tier 2 is going to be the family. So the family was a very notorious Australian cult based in the Dandenong Ranges, primarily between the 1960s to 1980s. And the person at the center of this cult, the center of the family, was a woman named Anne Hamilton Bryan. Now, a lot of the time when people hear the word cult in Australia, they think it is a made-up term or something that comes straight from a Hollywood movie. When you talk to people about figures in black robes who conduct ceremonies and rituals, it is very true, and these things do happen, and despite the glorification of it through Hollywood, these things are still happening today, and they still do very much happen in Australia. And if you have anybody that ever says to you cults don't exist, I'd recommend you to point them towards the family. So the family claimed to be a New Age group that taught Western and Eastern religious doctrines, and all of this was led by their leader, Anne. And Anne thought she was Jesus. Anne was telling her followers that she was the reincarnation of Jesus, and what's worse, they believed it. Now, what's extremely scary about the family was this wasn't a fringe cult. The family's members were doctors and lawyers, psychiatrists, and business owners. There were a lot of influential and powerful people associated with this cult. Now, what's extremely sadistic about this group was between 1968 and 1975, the family illegally adopted or took in over 14 infants and children. Now, some of these children and infants, they were actually brought into the family because their parents were members of the family. Adoption was being conducted by other members of the family, or Anne herself was beating the system and they were lying on documentation. Either way, they managed to obtain 14 children to be the New Age members of this cult. These children were going to be the future of this cult and spread the message. What's even more sadistic was every single one of these children were forced to dye their hair blonde, dress the exact same, and they were told that Anne was their biological mother. So much so to the point where the family were actually changing birth certificates and fabricating birth certificates to say Anne was your mother, and all of the children would go by Anne's last name. Now, the family was notorious for giving these adopted people LSD, and they would be given LSD for ritualistic purposes, for spiritual awakening, and this would occur continuously along with abuse. Now, it wasn't just the 14 adopted that were also administered LSD, no. The family had a lot of ties to the New Haven Hospital in Kew, Victoria. Now, even the patients that came into the New Haven Hospital were given LSD. They were experimenting on people that would come into the hospital. Now, it wasn't just LSD that these patients coming into the New Haven Hospital were given, no. They were also forced to undertake electroconclusive therapy, which essentially is electrodes being shot into the brain, into the body, and the main purpose of this was to cause seizures. Now, all of these methods, in my opinion, was a way to break the mind, to break people, indoctrinate them, and be able to mold it into whatever they wanted. They believed this is spiritual awakening. Now, everything I've dropped on you so far is true and can be verified, but this is where the conspiracy theory aspect comes into it, because in 1993, the family were raided, the 14 children were taken, and Anne was arrested. Now, after Anne was arrested, she was fined $5,000. That was Anne Bryan's punishment. Now, obviously, at the time, things were different and the law wasn't exactly equipped to combat psychological warfare and manipulation to this level, but obtaining 14 children illegally does not equal a $5,000 fine, which made people start to think, well, there are a lot of wealthy people, strong people connected to this cult. Doctors, lawyers, police officers, the list goes on and on. So people start to think Well, were the family that powerful that they managed to escape convictions? Now, at the age of 97 in 2019, Anne died, but there's still a lot of people out there that believe the family cult never truly disbanded. A lot of people still believe that this cult pulls a lot of the strings in Australia. The rabbit holes that you can go down for the family are absolutely wild. True crime buffs, there's a lot for you to dissect through this case as well, but something isn't right with this cult, and that's where the conspiracy theories start to come from. Conspiracy theory number 2 is Australian panthers. Now, the title of this theory pretty much speaks for itself. There are big wild cats roaming Australia. Panthers, pumas, leopards. If you've ever done a lot of camping around Victoria, New South Wales, or Queensland, primarily Lithgow, the Lithgow panther you may have heard before, you will hear stories of hunters, farmers, adventurers spotting these big wild cats. And some of these reports even go back 100 years or further down the line, where people have claimed to see panthers in Australia. There's been multiple cases of people seeing large paw prints around the area, or livestock kills that can't be explained, or footage on trail cams that doesn't look like a standard animal that we have in Australia. But there's also been cases where hunters have shot these animals and they have claimed through and through that was a panther. Now, I'll show you this picture, but back in 2005, a pretty respected deer hunter named Kurt Engel claimed to have shot one of these panthers. Here's the picture. Now, of all of his years of hunting deer and seeing big cats around the area, feral cats, Kurt says he has never seen anything quite like this, and he 100% believes it is a panther. And they actually sent off the DNA of this animal to the labs, and they came back and said, no, it was a feral cat. And Kurt stands by this, and a lot of hunters will stand by this, that no, they lied in the DNA reports. It's a pretty interesting conspiracy theory, and two of the main points that we get when you talk about Australian panthers is that during World War II, the military actually brought panthers over and they would use them as mascots. And when the war ended, they just cut them loose and let them run wild in the Australian bush. And the other theory is that back in the 1800s, there used to be a lot of traveling circuses around Australia and they used to import panthers. Now, people believe that the panthers actually managed to break free and get loose from these traveling circuses, and they got out into the bush and they started crossbreeding, and that is what we are seeing today. Conspiracy theory 3 is that Australia is a prison. And I want you to stay with me for this one. So this theory goes that Australia was designed and very much still functions as an open air prison. Not a prison where you can see the walls and the barbed wire fences and the towers all around it watching us, no, but more so a geographically isolated piece of land with a population that's easy to monitor, easy to control. Now, if you know your history, back in 1788, Australia was established as a penal colony. People still to this day believe that Australia is one big prison, one big test subject, one big penal colony that the rest of the world can monitor, watch. Now, I could go into a lot of different things that have happened in the past of Australia that would make you actually think, well, hang on a minute. Things are very different here, especially today in 2026, with a lot of things that are currently going on in the government in power. Well, it doesn't seem that far-fetched, does it? I mean, at this very moment, we are currently seeing that Australia could possibly lose any possibility to have free speech. Is this a social project where if it can be done in Australia, eventually it can be done to the rest of the world? It's worth a thought, worth digging into. It's pretty interesting and pretty scary at the same time. Net zero. So net zero refers to reducing greenhouse gas emissions as low as possible, essentially getting them to zero or as close to zero as possible. Now, Australia has committed to reaching net zero by 2050. Now, I put this conspiracy theory directly under Australia is a prison because they go hand in hand. So after hearing Australia is a prison, now listen to net zero because they sort of link in with each other. Because you see, the conspiracy theory isn't that net zero exists. It very much exists. It is getting pushed and it is meant to be achieved by 2050. The conspiracy theory is what net zero is actually used for. And this is what gets people talking because, for reference, Australia is responsible for roughly 1 to 1.3% of the entire world's greenhouse gas emissions. China is currently leading the world's greenhouse gas emissions at 30%. Now, where does the conspiracy theory come from? Well, a lot of people claim that it's for behavioral control, economic control, social control, population control. Now, one of the big theories that comes from this is the fact that it could very well be restricting Australia from financial gain. Australia is extremely, extremely rich with resources, and if we can't burn these resources and use these resources because we are trying to achieve net zero, it can very well stop Australia from becoming an extremely wealthy, rich country. For reference, just think about how wealthy Dubai is and how much resources they use. And then on top of that, if Australia is trying to achieve net zero because we truly, truly believe that we need to cut greenhouse gas emissions, it wouldn't make sense to be sending so many resources over to China that are emitting 30% of these. Why would Australia not want to be using its resourcing? Because Australia is a prison, and financial gain will be breaking Australia out of the social cohesion that we are meant to be staying in. One of the many things people will point out is that it is the easiest way to bring in the idea of 15-minute cities. When you think about this conspiracy theory, it gets pretty concerning, to be honest. There are things in this theory that don't make a lot of sense, and I'm not talking from a theory standpoint, I'm talking from a day-to-day life standpoint. Number 5 is the Piliga Princess, and this is one of Australia's most famous ghost stories. Now, the Piliga Scrub is some extremely dense bushland in New South Wales, and running through the Piliga Scrub is the Newell Highway. Now, along the Newell Highway, multiple truckers have claimed to see a woman pushing a shopping cart up and down the Newell Highway. Now, this is one of my favourite Australian ghost stories, so listen up. Now, back in the day, there was a woman named Claire Wibson. Now, Claire Wibson was a First Nation Australian. She was an Indigenous woman. Now, a lot of the First Nation Australians would claim that the Piliga Scrub was an extremely dangerous, cursed piece of land. Now, they would never enter this piece of land. They would say that beasts roam the area like yowies from Tier 1. Dark spirits haunt the land and it is cursed, so Aboriginals would not enter the Piliga Scrub. Now, what doesn't make sense is that Claire Wibson was a First Nation Australian and she would walk up and down the Newell Highway all the time, so much so that when she was alive, she was coined the Piliga Princess because she would always be spotted by truck drivers walking up and down the Newell Highway. And there's a lot of recounts from truck drivers. If you jump on Reddit or you catch some of my stories over on other socials, you will hear first-hand recounts from truck drivers that say, I picked up Claire Wibson at one point in my life and we would drive the Piliga Princess and we would always see her just walking at night along the Newell Highway. And one night in 1993, Claire Wibson was walking along the Newell Highway as a truck was approaching her. But this night was different. You see, Claire walked out in front of the truck, and the truck driver stated that Claire's face had this big, manic smile to it, and the truck couldn't stop in time, and he struck Claire down, dead, on the Newell Highway. The horrifying thing is that after 1993, truck drivers have still claimed to see the Piliga Princess walking up and down the Newell Highway. There's been multiple stories shared from truck stop to truck stop amongst friends around the campfire about their encounters with Claire Wibson, the Piliga Princess. Claire is one of Australia's most famous ghosts, and that's why she deserves her spot on Tier 2. Theory number 6 is Frederick Valentic, and this is probably in the top 3 conspiracy theories that you are going to deep dive yourself after this video. So on the 21st of October 1978, a pilot named Frederick Valentic was flying over the Bass Strait from Moorabbin to King Island. Now, as Fred was making this flight from Moorabbin to King Island, he put out a distress call claiming that he could see something extremely strange following him in the sky. This big metal object was in the sky and it was following his plane. And I'm going to show you some clips from the audio that have actually been recovered from Fred's Mayday call.
Delta Sierra Juliet, what type of aircraft is it?
Now, in total, this is about a 6-minute audio recording that you can find on YouTube and you can go listen to yourself because it's extremely strange. It's extremely creepy. Now, towards the end of Frederick's distress call, he lost communications, but not only that, he vanished entirely. His plane and Frederick were never seen again. Now, I think it's important to state that Frederick had over 150 hours of flight time. Now, he wasn't the most decorated pilot, and that is a disclaimer that needs to be put out there. He had failed previous exams and tests before, but he did have over 150 hours of flight time. So this flight from Moorabbin to King Island should have been a cakewalk for him. Now, Fred's family has stated weeks prior to this flight, he was becoming quite obsessive with the belief of UFOs, and there was a part of him that truly believed that if he was to ever vanish, it was caused by a UFO. These are things that he told his father. What makes this conspiracy theory so much stranger is before Frederick started his flight, multiple locals had reported seeing strange green lights in the sky this night. Now, about 20 minutes before Frederick's flight, this photo was taken, and it just adds more mystery to this conspiracy theory because people have to ask the question, what is that in the picture? Apparently this thing was moving so quick that a clear snapshot couldn't be taken on camera, and the people that were listening to Frederick's distress audio said that they could hear a sound towards the end of it of metal rubbing on metal. And then multiple locals from Cape Otway claimed that they saw this big metal thing in the sky with what looked like a small plane attached to it. Frederick's body has never been recovered, and Frederick's Cessna was never found. Years later, people found parts that they believe belonged to a Cessna, but there was never enough evidence to confirm that that was Frederick's plane. The disappearance of Frederick Valentic is an Australian story that does not get spoken about enough, and all of the conspiracy theories that spawn from this deserve to be spoken about and deserve to be theorized because this case is crazy. Theory number 7 is Project 415. Now, I believe I've researched and dug into this enough to be able to explain this. If I do miss anything or any key elements, please, guys, in the comments, hit this up because this is extremely consuming. A lot of caffeine was consumed while I was diving down the rabbit hole and researching Project 415. So bear with me. So if you haven't seen Tier 1, Conspiracy Theory 1 of Tier 1 was talking about Pine Gap. I'm not going to retouch on that because that's in the previous video. Now, Pine Gap and Five Eyes have a global surveillance network known as Echelon. Now, what Echelon was designed to do was intercept civilian, commercial, and political communications primarily used during the Cold War. Now, this piece of technology, this surveillance network, was never disclosed to the public. It was only released after the Snowden leaks. And you have to imagine Pine Gap isn't the entire machine, but one of the main nodes that allows Echelon to function properly. So essentially, Echelon was the piece of software or hardware that allowed Five Eyes and Pine Gap to intercept communications worldwide. That is confirmed. But Project 415, allegedly as a conspiracy, is what Australia started using this technology for after the fact. Googling Project 415 is rather difficult to find anything. It's not a surface level conspiracy theory. It's not a surface level project that can be found quite easy. But if you start diving into a lot of the archived documents and histories of Echelon, you will find something in there. Something called Project P415 or P-415. And P415, from what the documents read, was a project that took place in the 1980s, and it was used to help automate Echelon. So Echelon is one thing, P415 is another. Probably should have been on a lower tier, truth be told, because it was extremely difficult to find information around this, but the information is out there. And the conspiracy theory goes that Project 415 was actually to spy on Australia. Do you see the connections that I'm trying to do in these tiers? Echelon, P415, Net Zero, Australia is a prison. I'm going to continue this series trying to link as many cases and conspiracy theories with each other as possible so it's easy to follow along. I would recommend diving down the rabbit holes yourself with this conspiracy theory because it is extremely deep. The Hawkesbury River Monster. If you haven't heard about this, the conspiracy theory goes that we have essentially our own Nessie, our own Loch Ness Monster living in the Hawkesbury River. There's been multiple claims that people have seen something unusually large that lives and roams around the murky waters of the Hawkesbury River just northwest of Sydney. This is a pretty famous Australian cryptid. Conspiracy Theory 9 is Freemasonry, and we're going to focus on Freemasonry in Australia. Now, we'll probably link back to this and link this to other theories down the line, but this is just the base conspiracy theory about Freemasons. So Freemasonry emerged in Europe first in the 16th century, and it was spawned from stonemason Freemason guilds. Think of it as a lucrative fraternity that never fizzled out. So over the years, Freemasonry evolved from operational masons, builders, and stonemasons, and it eventually started to turn into speculative masonry, philosophical fraternity, if you will. Now, Freemasonry is not illegal, and it's not a secret in the way that some people think it is. So in the early stages of Freemasonry in Australia, it was a way to quietly connect politicians to police and lawyers and businessmen. They would all join this fraternity. Now, a lot of the conspiracy theory around Freemasonry, I suppose, started because there are parts of this fraternity that are kept quite secret, and there are parts of this fraternity that fall back onto old world values, old world laws, and spiritualistic and ritualistic practices. Now, diving into Freemasonry, I believe it would be a discredit to not mention that they are extremely charitable. Freemasonry in Australia are behind a lot of good charities. We're here for conspiracy theories, right? And the fun that comes with deep diving and rabbit holes. And people believe that Freemasonry is in charge of the entire world, and they have connections to all of the highest up people, and they are in control of everything that we see, moving everybody around like puppets, because this fraternity was so strong back in the medieval times, and they never lost that power. And Kings Park Satanists, if you live around Western Australia, or you do what I do and drink way too much coffee and deep dive, you'd have heard stories that in Kings Park in Western Australia, it is a huge hotspot for satanic cults and satanic rituals. Multiple residents to the area have said that they've heard chanting coming from the Kings Park area at night. They've seen shadowy figures dressed in dark robes moving into the park at night. Police have even been called multiple times because in the morning when people go into Kings Park, they have found burnt out candles, burnt out areas in the ground. They've found bones out there and occult items. Even a quite famous Australian author came forward at one point stating that she is a practicing Satanist and she has in fact conducted rituals with a group in Kings Park. I will link this directly back to Conspiracy Theory 1 of pub jargon, tier 2 of this iceberg. When people tell you that you are crazy for thinking that there are cults in Australia, refer them to these. Legends, I hope you enjoyed your time hanging out and are enjoying the way this series is going. I'd like to thank you all so much for all of the amazing comments on the first video of tier 1. It honestly has taken me off guard how amazing everybody is and how much fun we're all having with this series. So I am so looking forward to continuing it. And I would just like to put a quick disclaimer out there. I did move this week, and it was quite a big move back out to a little bit more regional in Victoria, and that is why there was a bit of a delay in the upload. But moving forward, I'm going to be a lot more on track with these uploads and keep them consistent. And just like the last video, start the conversations in the comments. Give me your conspiracy theories, because I am more than happy to tweak the iceberg the lower we go and throw your conspiracy theories in there. One of the biggest conspiracy theories are pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies are among the world's largest corporations. We'll be getting to that.